Greetings, everyone. Brian here for another supplemental episode. This week, we're going to be talking about Star Trek Discovery, which just wrapped up its third season. So, with me today is me, of course, and then Ryan, Captain Maddox, and our Dr. Tara, Dr. Teal. Hi, everybody.
Oh, hello, hello.
Hi. And this should come without. This should be obvious at this point, but there will be spoilers for.
Yes.
If you are not caught up on season 3, then you'll probably want to dip out of this until you have.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
But come back, because then you'll want to talk about it or hear about it and all that stuff. So, like, spoilers.
Ellipses. Enter.
Spoiler. Also, when did it first come out? The
2017.
Season? No.
Oh.
The season finale.
Just last Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah, last Thursday.
4 days ago as we're recording this, I think.
Oh, okay. So it took us until today to actually see it. So after we watched it, we were like, aren't we supposed to record something talking about Discovery? Can we talk about Discovery? Let's talk about Discovery.
Also, in those 4 days, stuff was spoiled for us.
Yes, because
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we live in the internet age.
The internet is a spoilery place.
Oh, and also in those 4 days, our Republic almost came to a crashing halt.
Also, I think maybe that's what happened. There was so much bad in the news. Everyone's like, "Yeah, but look at Michael Burnham in a new uniform. Look."
So, and you know what? In the spirit of the moment, maybe we should talk about Star Trek Insurrection instead.
Oh. Too soon. Too soon? Yeah.
Okay.
Way.
It is a gorge.
Or maybe Star Trek Undiscovered Country. A little more timely.
Yeah.
Discovery season 3. What was your guys's feelings?
Since this is our first opportunity to talk any Discovery in any sort of official capacity as Star Trek Tempest, do we want
notes?
Do we want to go back earlier?
I mean, I was obviously going to, at least in my case, talk about season 3 in relation to the first couple of seasons. But you're right, this is kind of the first. Well, we did Lower Decks, but this is the first time we're talking about Discovery specifically at all.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're late to the party because there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of podcasters who have been offering their comments on Discovery since 2017.
Also, I would like to point out, you know how, like, if you've ever done a workout video, they have someone in the background that's doing the modifications because the main workout might be a little too hard. I'm basically your Star Trek modification here. Like, these two are going to be super intense about it. And like Ryan had some like really nitty gritty problems. And I assume Brian does as well.
I got 4 years of problems now.
And I'm like, oh, this show's fun. Like that. So look to me for your modifications. Okay.
But it is a very important perspective to have because people do enjoy the show. And frankly, I'm one of them. I'm not going to lie. I do enjoy it.
Absolutely.
It's just a different,
and it's that sentiment that goes around the internet every now and then of like, you can be a fan of something without knowing every single goddamn thing about it.
Right. Yes, exactly that.
But so just to recap briefly with page 1 of my notes.
Oh my God.
No. So when Discovery first came out, I was really trepidatious because we had already been burned, in our opinion anyway, by the Kelvin timeline Star Trek movies. Now, I enjoy those movies a lot more than Brian does. I can appreciate them a little bit more than Brian does. That being said, they're not my flavor of Star Trek that I enjoy.
Right.
They're for a different time. They're for a different audience, and they serve that purpose financially very, very well. But so I was very nervous about Star Trek Discovery, and my initial impression. And this is the very first note I wrote down. And it was, from my perspective, the most irreverent Star Trek show that was ever made in terms of respecting any kind of canon that had already been previously established.
Sure.
Oh, in terms, you mean it's in the sense of like not worrying about it?
Correct. Yeah. They went so far into, like, I know you're not going to make a set out of plywood and basic paint colors and jujubes on and and go back that far. But the fact that they like intentionally incorporated technology that didn't even exist in the original series, and this is supposed to predate the original series, holograms.
Sure.
You never saw a single
Yeah.
hologram in the original series that was on the Federation side of things.
Right.
So it was like, and then the Klingons. So you got to go one way or another. You got to go original series Klingons, or you got to go, in my opinion, you got to go, TNG or, Star Trek original series movies Klingons.
DS9.
But they went a new way. We reinvented the Klingons a third or fourth time, if you include the Abrams.
When we first started watching it, people would say like, "Oh, have you watched that new Star Trek show?" And I'm like, "Oh, the one with the mushmouth Klingons." Yep.
Yeah.
So far, not a big fan, but I liked the show, and I was rooting for it. I was like, "Be good," so because if Ryan hates it, I won't get to watch it, which is probably also not true. He would watch it and hate it. At the same time.
We watched the Star Wars prequels after all, so
Right,
we'll watch anything.
But yeah, that was at first I was just like, the Klingons are like unsettling for me. I can't get past them, but overall I liked it. But when they fixed the Klingons more or less, like they sort of
by season 2 they
sort of blended them with what they were originally trying to do, with something that was a little closer to what was traditionally their depiction.
And so my impression, I wonder if the decision to alter the Klingons' aesthetic was because of reaction, as opposed to something that was already in the pipeline from the beginning of the production, like something they had already pre-planned.
Oh, absolutely. I think it was.
And that's disappointing, but it's also a good thing, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not the first time that Star Trek or anything else, puts a first draft of something on the screen and goes, that wasn't quite right, and then it goes back and fixes it, and just live with it.
First season Picard was very different.
Maybe Picard will just be French in name, and that's it.
Until 30 years later, where he will then be able to speak French for some reason.
But then he could have taken lessons.
Yeah, maybe
he retired. Right?
What's the word? It's immersion, right? It's like
living in France for 70 years finally caught up with it. Those Babel lessons finally caught up with him.
Yes, exactly.
As Ryan and I have discussed prior to recording this, we both always had a bit of we didn't feel like the production design of the era fits with the era that it was set in, and that like Ryan and I have specifically said, like, if that production design were just in its own time setting and didn't have to be so closely connected to a design aesthetic that we already were super familiar with, then I would love it.
Yeah.
But on its own, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
But just trying to fit it into the tapestry, it is there's unavoidably just this huge non sequitur. And I think like that people get nasty on the internet in terms of like, oh, well, that's a nitpick, or that's a valid criticism and whatnot, which I think like that aspect of it is it's a reflection, or it's like a good metaphor for the overall difficulty of the first couple of seasons, which is that it is like in this very narrow time period, like it's trying to tell a prequel story in this very small window of time.
Yeah.
And as a result, it really boxed itself in terms of what kind of stories it could tell. So I was very excited about season 3 because by the nature of the premise, they were now taking themselves out of that box and they were free to tell a bigger story.
100%.
Absolutely. I don't understand why anybody does prequels. I'm like, the ability to make that show has evolved so much that you can't possibly make it.
Yeah.
Like the temptation is too great to use science and technology that we have in this era, let alone try to make up, something that they would have had before they made this futuristic show in the 60s. Like
So
stop making prequels.
it's a difference between like when Star Wars put something on screen, when The Mandalorian put something on screen, and they're using technology that is 60s and 70s era technology that was cutting edge at the time to make things look futuristic. And but they've owned it.
Right.
Like Star Wars has committed to keeping that aesthetic constant throughout all of its production. And that's reverent. That's what I meant. That's what I meant by this show being irreverent.
Well, and not just that they owned it, but that the storytelling for a Star Wars world is not about, hey, this is us bettering the future and embracing technology and
That's
the other thing is that Star Wars is a bit more fantasy in the sense that it's not connected to a specific time and location in our real world. It's long time ago, galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
So, it has a little bit of that fantasy element that you can give that wiggle room.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think, like, I can't think of another science fiction property or franchise or anything that would have faced the specific problem that Star Trek does, in the sense that it is now older than the future it started to depict. Right. Because the 1960s show mentions the eugenics wars and World War III and puts them in the 1990s, right?
Wow.
Is there any other piece of media or fiction or franchise or anything that like started that far back and then has actually stuck around long enough for history to catch up to it? I can't think of it.
Right.
Well, I don't think there would be one. I mean, Star Trek is the longest lived science fiction production in I think modern history, right?
Right.
There's nothing.
The only other candidate is Doctor Who. So
you know what, Doctor Who, that's a very good point. But Doctor Who reimagines itself every time a doctor is regenerated.
Well,
so
there's Doctor Who is also a little bit more fantasy in that regard, in terms of like, oh, it's a magic blue box that can do whatever you need it to.
Exactly.
As opposed to this is technology based on the science as we know it today, and then that science changes over 50 years.
Right.
So one other thing I want to say really quickly, and you basically just kind of said all this already. The only reason I disliked Discovery season 1 at all was because of the choice that they made to do that. Like, other than that, if any franchise ever, if anybody had the courage to reboot Star Trek completely, just to say it's not tied to anything in the past, it's just, we're going to do Star Trek and we're going to do it a new way. If there was ever a show that deserved that, it is Star Trek. And I think if this was a reboot, I would be on board 100% from minute one. And from the canon, from the in-world perspective, storytelling aside, we can argue about storytelling and the choices that they make as a completely separate conversation. But to like you said, box yourself into this and to not just declare it an outright reboot, it already turns off the fan base, such as for me and you, that are canon and lore, experts, people who want their old. If you're gonna say it's part of the original show, you got to respect the original show.
So I have two examples of this that are like polar opposites. Watching this show with Ryan in particular. So the first, which is in the grouping of like people like me probably wouldn't question it real hard, but he was really upset, is the turbo lift situation. He immediately he was like upset and annoyed, and he was like, they wouldn't look like that and it's not that big inside. And I was like, you don't know, you've never been inside a spaceship. So and I said, like, well, it doesn't just go up and down, it goes all different directions. And he's like, that is not what I'm upset about. And that's like, just and so he was super mad and I super didn't care. And then the opposite end of that was with Philippa
We're
And-
talking season 3 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
What the opposite end, I'm just talking about like the
Examples. Sure.
yeah,
Okay.
the
Sorry.
the opposite end of that is with Philippa and the I was like, what the hell is this weird door and this weird guy standing in the snow? This is stupid and I hate it. And Ryan's like, I think this is City on the Edge of Forever and it's a reference from the original series. And I was like, well, I mean, that's good fan service then. But I was real
Why do
bothered.
I care?
Why do I give a crap?
Well, and the interesting part about that was I didn't think in the moment that it was the Guardian. I didn't think it was going to be directly like the Guardian from City on the Edge of Forever. She was like, why would this happen? And
This is dumb.
And I was like, it might be dumb, but it's not unprecedented because in City on the Edge of Forever, there was this portal that took people back in time into different dimensions.
He said that exact thing.
And he has a line, or it has a line of, like, oh yeah, I used to do things this way. I used to let people do this, but I stopped because shenanigans happened, which explains why his behavior is different. It's actually it's an actual line between why its behavior was this way in the original series episode and why it's different now.
But in the difference between like following canon and getting down to nitpicky little things versus ignoring those little things and doing whatever the hell they want, like can't make everybody happy all the time, I guess.
Yeah, but you can make logical sense within your own universe.
Yeah.
Like you've already set up the Discovery next to the Enterprise, which is supposedly the original series Enterprise. Now, granted, I don't know what justification they're making for changing the scale, because there is a difference in scale, but it's not a massive difference in scale.
Okay.
And so we know how big the Discovery is, and it ain't that big.
So
it ain't big enough to have a city-sized landscape inside a turbo ship.
That whole scene, he's worried about the size of the turbo lift and that whole situation, and I'm just like, kick that guy out of there, kick him off of there, kick him really hard in the chest. Like that was me. That whole scene.
So, like Ryan and I have specifically joked about this, and we're not the only other people on the internet have joked about it as well, in terms of like, they've had shots in Discovery of the turbo shaft of Discovery and how ridiculously expansive it is. It's like a Doctor Who sense of like it's bigger on the inside.
Right.
And then that shot happens in season 3, and I was like, literally, I was genuinely, this is not a joke, I was genuinely confused because I thought that some characters had switched from being on Discovery to the Federation space station because the visual was just that ludicrously huge that I was like, okay, even though I know we've joked about this in the past, there's no way anybody could look at that visual and go, yes, that's what the inside of a starship, a space constrained vessel.
Hey, not just anybody. This girl right here. I was like, I don't know, they're big in there.
But I was sincerely, like, genuinely like, wait, I thought those characters were on Discovery right now. Are they on the space station or not? Or are they on Discovery? I don't know.
The note I have here is Discovery as big as a Dyson sphere?
Yeah.
Anyway.
To change topics entirely. In the very beginning of the show, when Jason Isaacs is on screen, the only things I could think at first were he's in Harry Potter, he's Lucius Malfoy, he's in Harry Potter. Like that's where my brain was. And then finally I broke from that and I was on board with him. And generally I dislike the whole like secretly a bad guy from the beginning, like plot device. Like it's always bothered me, like, oh, a double agent, how neat is that? But because the alternate universe or mirror universe or any of those was like a very Star Trek thing, I was like, yeah, okay, let's see where this goes. That's fine. And like some of the like mirror universe episodes or alternate universe or mirror universe?
Mirror universe.
It was the mirror universe. Okay.
Mirror universe is a alternate universe.
but yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. It's one specific
Yeah.
alternate universe.
Sure. I didn't love that there was more than one episode of that. I wanted it to be like, and there that was, okie dokie, bye. Like, and
Yeah.
so that was a small
I
point of
did. I
frustration.
really like the idea of a mirror universe character trying to
Mhm.
live in the quote unquote prime or our universe over an extended period of time. So I thought that was a really cool idea. I don't think they necessarily explored it or set it up in to take the most advantage of the idea, but it is a good idea.
Yeah.
I do have to say, like, I love I think Michelle Yeoh is a fantastic actress, and she's good in just about everything she does.
Yeah.
But I in all 3 seasons, I have not really been able to buy her as this like mustache twirling
As a
evil
super villain.
scene chewing. Like, I don't know if she's just like too good of an actress for that. Like, you have to be a certain level of bad actor to chew the scenery enough to be a mirror universe episode.
Yeah.
There's just been something about her mustache twirling aspect that I just like. I don't buy.
Buy it. Yeah.
Yeoh.
I felt the
and
same.
I think, honest to goodness, that feeling permeates the whole show.
Yeah.
For me, through a lot of it.
Every
Like,
villain.
Not only that,
I'm
but
sorry.
honestly, no, it's okay. I honestly
Hey, could you let the guys talk for once, Tara?
I honestly don't think, I don't buy the relationships on Discovery as much as the writers want me to.
The good relationships?
Correct.
Especially
Oh.
especially Giorgio in season 3, where it's supposed to be this like, oh, she is the ship's pet evil character.
Yeah.
And like, she says all these terrible things, and everybody just finds that endearing now. For
She's
some
like
reason.
a mean cat.
Yeah.
That's
I
fine.
absolutely did not buy that dynamic in season 3, and it got to the point where it was really starting to grate on me, where like, she's just a horrible person to everybody else all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was in a tying this back to role-playing games, I was in a D&D group like that, where one of the characters was just a jerk the entire time. And like, that was perfectly valid character choice on that person's part, and like, the guy himself in real life is a great guy, but it just got grating after a while. And I was like, this is not like, I don't want to spend my time doing this.
Well, and I feel like when you sit down to watch a show, you want to invest in these characters, and if it's somebody that doesn't have much redeeming quality to them, then you don't care about them, and so you don't care how they interact with other people, and you don't care what happens to them, because like, well, if you're sort of a turd to everyone, then okay, bye.
It just kind of occurred to me just this moment why it might be like that. I don't have the same connection to these characters as I have any other characters in Star Trek.
I'm very defensive about a few of them.
The one exception is Tilly. Hold on, let me finish.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Tilly is, I love the hell out of Tilly.
Same.
And I have a big problem with the season 3 finale's payoff on her character, because I don't think they did anything with her that she deserved, both the actress and the character. But we only get, what is there, 13 episodes, 18? What is it?
13.
We only get 13 episodes a season. Like, I have never bought into Stamets and Culber the way that I buy into Troy and Riker. But they have 7 seasons of 26 episodes a piece to build that in nuance, whereas these writers are just like, here, these characters love each other, so they say loving things. And
like, in TNG, there were full episodes, or like at least most of an episode devoted to these relationships, so we see them explored more, because of like, okay, these two characters are in a cave together for the entire episode, and you're gonna figure out that Picard and Crusher have a lot of history, and like, we just haven't had those kinds of.
They don't have the luxury of having that timeline. Like
Right.
there's so much that happens in every single episode that furthers the season long arc.
Yeah.
That tries to further every character and every relationship.
Yeah.
That has to focus on Michael by definition because she's the lead.
Right.
Which
although
it's just a disadvantageous position to be in from the writer's perspective, I guess.
That being said, though, I have bought into these relationships more, and maybe it's the empath in me and not just in my Tempest character. But like, I want to see who they connect with on the ship, because if I personally were on a ship like that, I would need those relationships to function. Let's be honest, I am Tilly, but I love that Adira and Colbert and Stamets and Gray formed this little family. I love like the dynamic between Saru and Michael, and the dynamic between Tilly and Michael, and the dynamic between Detmer and Owo. I like just that last episode. It was like, oh, they really care so much about each other. Like we finally started having these little moments of like, oh, hey, like I saw that look, I saw that, you know, whatever just transpired. Like there's more there.
Sure. And I do agree, because I do appreciate Detmer and Owo's relationship, because I don't know. I buy that.
So I think what it goes to is and I think why Tilly is such a clear exception to it, because I feel the same way, but it goes towards that like serialized story. It's like, it's not just the amount of, oh, there was 23 hours of television to a TNG season versus 13,
right?
But it's that serialized sense where like you were saying, Ryan, where every scene and every moment is driving this bigger story, and therefore every moment has this like Lord of the Rings amount of epicness to it, or trying to, at least,
right?
And like, that's just not like, it's important to have stakes for the story, for whatever the big story is, but like humans just don't generally exist in those moments all the time.
Yeah.
So we're not seeing these humans in kind of like, oh yeah, we're just hanging out in Ted Forward, having a drink and joking about whatever, or I'm gonna tease you, and so I'm gonna tease you back by playing the trombone in a certain way or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and Discovery does have those moments, and I think season 3 has more of them, and I think that's kind of what we're reacting to.
Yeah.
When you know, in this part of the conversation, but if you're thinking about it as a ratio of like, you know, one part giant story and one part human relationships, it's like 5 parts giant story and 1 part humans actually just being human with each other.
It's kind of like Battlestar Galactica was like there's this overarching story that is more important than the individual relationships, and
everybody just has to be so operatic about the story at every moment that it's just like, that is very epic, that is, you know, a very expansive and grand story, but it doesn't feel human in a certain way,
right? Because we don't see them in their downtime, we don't see their hobbies, we don't see them being silly, we don't see, you know, anything. The first character that I felt like I knew was Adira, because I saw them playing the violin, or was it the cello? It's the cello,
I think.
Yeah. Cello. I saw them playing the cello. I saw them tell Stamets, like, I don't want to be referred to as her, I'd prefer they. I saw them like taking care of themselves outside of work, outside of like, this is my job on this ship, and it was the first character that we really saw in that way.
And outside of like, because they have this, you know, personal transformative journey that they go on, in the sense of, well, I'm this 17 or 18-year-old, you know, whatever person who has no experience, but then I also have this Starfleet admiral in my head, and I have to connect those two, and I also have my partner who is dead now but is in my head somehow, for like they still have this huge character arc and development to go through, but they have more of a sense of, like you saying, like this is what I'm gonna do because this is me, and I have 5 minutes or whatever. And I think that's why Tilly is an exception in that regard too, because Tilly, out of all of them, is the most of like, oh, she's a person in these crazy circumstances.
Right. And we also see her like she tries to get into the command program and fails. Like she
Yeah.
is busting her ass to do things and failing, and then dealing with failure and feeling real feelings and talking it out and being mad and being sad and being all of these things. And
I think I agree with everything everybody just said, 100%. And it didn't.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have, everybody.
You got me. Your point with Adira is really well taken, because I didn't really notice that I had that same appreciation for their character as you do until now. And so like that makes sense. I do feel those things.
Yeah.
The one character that has bothered me the most, because I want to like him so much, and I just haven't, is like Stamets. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's acting. I don't know if it's writing, but I've never bought into Stamets as a chief engineer of a starship. And
go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's.
Well, I was going to say, I think it, at least for me, because I do feel similarly, though maybe not quite as strongly. I think it may be a similar thing as to Giorgio, where he was just this very, he kind of had like a Pulaski feel going on, right? Where he's just kind of a jerk or thorny and prickly, and eventually that just becomes really tiring to spend time with as a person.
Right.
And like, again, there's a way to be, there's a way for a character to be prickly but still be whatever you want to say, like lovable or connectable.
Like Reno.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent years perfecting that.
No, not you.
I said Reno.
Reno.
Reno. I thought you said you.
No. The character Reno is she has less screen time than Stamets, and I already buy her as.
Well, there's a difference between being prickly and being dry, because Reno is 100% dry, and Stamets is just like pissy at everyone.
Well, let me dive in a little bit more to how I feel about Stamets, because I want I've admired the actor for unbeknownst for decades, because he was in School Ties, which is one of those movies that I love, that I watched repeatedly over and over again.
I've never seen it.
Oh my gosh, have you not? With Brendan Fraser?
Never.
And, oh my
and
gosh,
I love Brendan
it's
Fraser.
so good.
Is that the one where he stands at, like, he's the Jewish guy at a prep school?
Correct.
And he's like, the only scene I remember is him standing outside in the rain shouting at the dorms.
Yeah,
Is
Coward.
that one?
I've never seen it.
Yeah, Cowards. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Anthony Rapp is in that?
Anthony Rapp. I almost had to look up his name,
Oh,
because I'm like, I'm a huge fan of this actor, and I can't even think of his
And
name.
he's in Rent, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's the other thing, is he's in Rent.
Yeah.
And he's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's a lack of talent on Anthony Rapp's part. It's just that I don't buy that. Maybe I'm biased, and maybe people who watched the technobabble in TNG, when, like my father, for example, who was a huge Star Trek fan when it came out in the original series, and then he watched the TNG, and when TNG came out, I asked him, I remember this is 1987, and I remember asking my dad, well, did you like it after the first episode? And he's like, I don't know why they just didn't bring the first cast back. Like, so and I wonder if he would have had the same reaction to Geordi, or at the chief engineer, whatever his name was in the first season, spitting out some techno babble. But I just don't buy it with Stamets, and I don't buy the way that they solve their engineering problems on Discovery is so quick and so easy, and there's no there's no
There's nothing at stake.
there's plenty at stake.
Oh.
It's just there's no difficulty. There's no like, oh, we just have to do
Challenge.
this, and this. And then it's like, okay, we just did those things. I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe that has always existed and I just accepted it as a kid watching TNG. And now that I'm a more analytically thinking and less imaginative adult, I don't buy it. But
I think there's something there, because one thing, as I put Tempest scenarios together, one thing I'll try to do is like go back and watch whatever TNG episode I feel is the most relevant. And one thing that I've noticed is that there are plenty of times where the crew try something, a solution or whatever, and it doesn't work. Like in a very RPG kind of sense, in like it feels like, okay, Data has this idea and he's going to roll an engineering task, and he doesn't roll well enough, so that approach doesn't work. So then they go back to the drawing board and they come up with a different idea.
Can you think of an example? I actually can't think of any off the top of my head where they other than Booby Trap. In Booby Trap, they try many times.
Holodeck episode?
Booby Trap is the one where they get caught in the asteroid minefield that is literally they get trapped in the same trap that what's the species? Oh my gosh.
It's the only time they ever mentioned, but it's an ancient extinct species, died in a war.
Yeah,
they find this old ship.
Didn't you ever play with ships and bottles when you were boys?
Yeah, but is that the episode where he's in the holodeck program with the scientist working out that problem?
Yes, it is. Yes, with Leah Brahms. Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes, we were saying the same thing. I didn't let you finish again.
That's okay.
But other than that, I can't think of one off the top of my head.
I actually could, but it would be too big of a clue for Tempest, so I can't. I don't want to say it to you now.
That's funny. Let's watch TNG this week.
But your point, Ryan, is that those episodes do exist.
Yeah, I mean, again, and maybe it's just because I was looking for it, right? And I was already kind of in an RPG mindset because that's why I was watching it. So, and it was always there, and I just didn't notice it before. And maybe it's there in Discovery, and I'm just not noticing it. But I do feel the same way. It's the sense of like, I also wonder if it's an aspect of them not like an episode of Discovery right now sort of still has act breaks like where commercials would go, but there aren't actually any commercials in them. So I wonder if that plays into a sense of it of like, oh, well, I had to watch that Pizza Hut commercial before they figured out the problem. Here I did.
That's interesting.
And that's why it felt like they got through the problem so much faster.
Really
like the time passes moments.
Right.
Yeah.
There are commercials for people who don't pay for the premier membership, by the way. So I wonder that'd be an interesting question to pose to somebody who chooses not to pay for the
if
the
that
non-commercial
feels
version.
different that's really interesting. Also, I have a theory. So first of all, I was really glad.
I thought you might.
I was really glad that Book being empathic with animals was not something that was like brand new to the season finale. Like, oh, today I have this skill and I can use it right this minute. It was established earlier on, although Ryan, thank you for the high five. Although Ryan had forgotten it. And I was like, no, with animals, remember? And he was like, oh, yeah, okay. Anyway, so my theory is that Stamets, who was the only one who could take them to Black Alert and jump the ship and all that stuff, will find that he is no longer that person, that like only one and only person that can do that, and will have to work harder to earn his place amongst everybody, because it won't just be like, well, you can't do anything without me, so I'll act however I want. Is my theory. And like, I'm gonna put this out here right now. If they ever get rid of Book, I quit the show. I will never watch it ever.
Really?
Again. Yes, because I love him. You
love him because he's hot, or you love him because
¿Por qué no los dos? I love him for all the reasons. I think he's great as that grounded character who is not part of Starfleet, who is that like outside presence, who we can look to be like, are they crazy? Or like, are you, do you understand what they're working for here too? You do. Okay, you get it. Okay, well, if he gets it, then I get it, and let's go together.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you love book, because man, do I hate book ship.
Oh, you do.
Oh,
hate
God,
Book
yes.
Ship.
I like the interior of book ship.
Whatever.
All right, so let's talk.
Also, he has a major love for that cat, and
No,
every
that's
time,
awesome.
Every
Yeah.
time he calls her a queen, I'm like, oh my God, I love him.
Yeah, that was really the way into your heart.
Oh.
But so
He kicked him off the turbo lift because he insulted his cat.
He kicked him off the turbo lift, and the man fell 30,000 feet.
He should have. He deserved it.
He fell down a bottomless pit in a starship
Again.
and
bottom.
all credit Discovery. That is not a Star Trek moments that is unique to Discovery in that, but
Yeah.
Yes,
I didn't care. I
but
hated that guy.
so season 3, the thing that I love that I had, like you said earlier, Brian, getting this ship with this aesthetic into the future of the timeline in Star Trek is exactly what is needed for a Star Trek show to be successful to this guy. And I'm speaking really selfishly here, because you can have plenty of good story arcs in the past and yada yada, but I want to see Star Trek take place in the timeline, in the future timeline. Why, to Tara's point earlier, why hinder yourself with the advancement in storytelling technology that we have today by putting something in the past of the timeline that we already know? It just doesn't make sense. So things that I love about season 3 of Discovery. I love the programmable matter. I think that's super cool. I'm all on board. I love that they talk to each other in holograms. I love that there's been transporter advancement and transporter technology advancement.
Yeah, when they had those like immediate transport, and everybody on Discovery geeked out about it. Like that was very cool.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, I just love that they're there finally. That this ship and this crew is finally in the future timeline, because
this fine ship, this fine crew.
Yeah.
And things that I love about season 3 are, I have more things that I love about season 3 than season 2, and I think that's because my mind is less biased against it, because I always had that default voice in my head going, well, yeah, but it's supposed to be.
But how does this fit in?
Yeah.
And I think in the first 2 seasons, like Discovery just set up an impossible problem for itself of like, okay, we've got to tell a modern story with a modern production value and appeal, but also cater to the fans that want to, catch every Easter egg that there is.
Right.
And I think they just put themselves into a box that was too small to move around. And now we still have this problem from canon where we have this magical, amazing spore drive thing that would absolutely not be buried and forgotten about, because it's so incredibly powerful that it just breaks the universe, and there's no real way around that.
If that was a 25th century invention, if Discovery took place after the events of Star Trek Nemesis, then it would be fine. Like it's a prototype technology. But the fact that they had, like you said, they put this prototype technology to, like, that was more advanced than anything we'd ever seen in all up to and including Star Trek Nemesis, which was the latest in the timeline. But
then they left with it. Like they went so far into the future, and it was the only one.
Right, but Brian, if I'm understanding your point, Brian, it's that
I doubt it.
This that this technology existed in the late 23rd century.
Well, they made it up though. Like it was.
But it's the sense of that, like, because I think they realized at some points and tried to do some backpedaling, but it's just basically the idea of like, if that technology is as powerful as you have depicted it, there is no way that you would just let that go. Like whatever the limitation is, Starfleet or the Federation would have half of its best scientists figuring out.
Yeah.
That's just that's the practical reality of it. Like, okay, you've taken off this limit, this break in terms of this handbrake in terms of whatever the concept is, and then you sort of go, oh crap. But that's a huge problem with the JJ movies, in the sense that like people make fun of the sense of like of the like trying to constrain things in terms of space and distance and the limitations of that story, right? But I think it's actually a fairly important aspect, because the idea is that you're this crew of people on a ship out in the middle of nowhere on the final frontier, and like that distance and that separation from home and everything else is an important element of the show. And so when Enterprise made it from Earth to Klingon homeworld in 4 days, like that was kind of an element against that. And then JJ movies go even further in that direction, and then the spore drive in Discovery just kind of breaks it all together. And it's like it's not just a nerd quibble kind of thing. I think it really does hinder the fundamental premise of it.
Yeah. So because what is the point of having a deep space exploration vehicle if you can just transport there in the Abrams verse?
Yeah.
Or you can just equip everybody with a spore drive and just hop there.
Yeah.
With no time passing at all. You don't even need provisions. You can go from one side of the galaxy to the other.
Aren't those jumps what Battlestar Galactica did when they would jump?
I don't know. I don't know if the mechanics are the same.
Okay. I'm just saying, like, I think it's okay to introduce a new way of doing things, because that's what everybody tries all the time. Everybody tries new stuff and new technology, and sometimes they fail and sometimes they're wildly successful, and people, everyone wants that thing, like they covet that thing, and it, whatever. But when they jumped that far into the future with the whole Red Angel situation, like, didn't they say something about striking it from all records, like it was redacted or something? And
well, that's what I'm saying in terms of like they tried to backpedal after the fact. Especially in the season 2 finale, where they're like, yeah, we buried it and nobody's ever going to know about it forever,
right?
And like, that is them definitely backpedaling in terms of, oops, we broke the premise, and now we've got to make sure we've got to figure out how it's not broken for all of this shows that have already happened, but that are still in the future. But yeah, I mean, again, I think it is a fundamentally different thing, in the sense that like Star Wars, they cross the galaxy in the blink of an eye, however quickly the plot needs it to be.
Right.
In Battlestar Galactica, we never really get a sense of the actual amount of distance that they're covering.
They jump, right?
But the difference is both of those things are thematically about they're about things where that doesn't really matter, right?
Like, I see that.
Battlestar is about their survival, so it's not about how fast they can go. It's about how far behind them the Cylons are.
Right. That's a good point.
So yeah, and
sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
On a different question, since they've been in the future, has anyone even mentioned Klingons?
You know what? That's a good point. I don't think they have.
Not that I can recall.
So I'm interested in that, and whether they're going to ever address that ever again. Like, what happened to the Klingons?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the end of season 3 and where it's going to go from here, because that's certainly a question I'd like answered.
I liked that they set it up.
Yeah.
The way you go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. So they are basically turning Discovery into a delivery run ship, which I think is both thematically a good choice and sets them up for potentially getting back to a
Episodic.
more traditional episodic storytelling approach.
In which case, we would have all these different episodes to really know these characters and their relationships and stuff. Because
And not only know the characters on the ship, but also know the worlds and how the burn, which we haven't even gotten to yet, how the burn affected all these different former Federation worlds.
yeah,
That's
Yeah.
there's a
How
lot
they
of
all
potential
dealt with this enormously destructive natural disaster that happened.
there. Yeah. So
Right.
there's
the aftermath.
I'm excited for the potential of season 4. I am not optimistic that it'll unfold in the way that I want.
You know what?
But because I don't think in today's day and age, producers and showrunners will ever turn back to a purely episodic storytelling format.
Yeah.
I agree. Nor should they. Like, I think, I think we're spoiled now at this point with some of the amazing serialized television that has come out in the last couple of decades.
Mhm.
And like that's been a real leap forward in terms of the form and the medium, but just in storytelling in general, like how many hours do we spend with Walter White as a character
Yeah.
over Scarface, for example, right? Like just the fact that we spend like dozens and dozens of hours with Walter White compared to Scarface, we spend 2 hours with.
Yeah.
Like that's amazing when it's done really well.
Yeah.
But it's also harder to do.
Also, in all of these shows, different shows that okay, in lots of different sci-fi shows, right? My favorite moments are usually like that family dinner where they all sat down and they were like trading stories and they were just being with each other, and it ends badly, right? That happened on Firefly too. They'd have these
Yeah.
family dinners and something always went wrong or something blew up or whatever thing. But those were the
It's Space
moments.
Thanksgiving.
It is, yeah, Space Thanksgiving. That's a great way to put it. And those are the moments where we like, instead of like we gotta jump here and do the thing and blow up the stuff and save this person and like all the urgency, we have this minute of just like even as Ryan and I and our 3 kids, like we're bonkers all of the time, running, but we sit down for this family meal and it's we're gonna yell at the kids and try to get them to eat their food. Please God, eat anything ever. And we're gonna talk about some crazy thing that happened that day in the news or at work or whatever thing. But it's family dinner, like it's that moment when we actually sit and are just together. And I want to see more of that with these characters, more of these like slowed down moments of just like.
Yeah.
There's an interesting commentary on the movie Logan, where they talk about how the most enjoyable scene that they filmed was the sit down dinner. When they're all at the I forget what the characters' names are, the house on the farm, basically, and they're all sitting down and they're eating dinner, and it's Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman and the family that's there, that's hosting them, and how as characters, as actors rather, who have played these characters and loved these characters for so long, that was the most real that it got for them,
right?
And that's a exceptionally poignant point of view, I think.
Thanks.
That and something I do think Discovery's lacks, like these moments of just
they had that one right. family dinner, right. It was like, oh good,
they need more of it.
Yeah
It's it's almost exactly that joke from Galaxy Quest where is it when Guy is talking to the convention crowd and he's like, these people, they were more than just crew, they were family, right? And it's it's played as a joke, but like that's the idea, is that okay, these characters in front of you are a family and you feel connected to them as if they are a family. And it comes through in moments and scenes like those. It doesn't come through in the scenes where, and you still need the scenes of Michael blowing up a wormhole to save the galaxy.
Totally.
Like, that's still an important scene, but the
Totally.
connection to the characters doesn't come in those scenes.
Right.
It comes in the Space Thanksgiving scene.
Space Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And it's there's just not as many of those in Discovery as there are or have been in previous versions.
Picard suffers from the same thing, where they rely so heavily on the legwork that was done with the character development in the originals, in the original series, in the original Next Generation show,
In the original series.
correct. That it comes off as less genuine because you're not having those moments now. With the, we'll talk about Picard later. But anyway, so but I think that all comes down to the fact that you don't have 26 hours worth of storytelling to sneak in those moments. And it's those sneaky moments that build characters. And they build them more effectively than force feeding it, which is what you have to, like, how else do you do it in a 13 episode arc? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, you have to.
Yeah, you end up with these scenes where Michael is making some kind of impassioned speech about how their family, and you're trying to use that as the kind of a substitute for the scenes that we've been talking about, and it just doesn't carry the same weight.
I have to say,
because you can tell it's not really human, in the sense of like, this is something I could see me interacting with a family member in my life or a friend in my life or whatever. It just doesn't carry the same kind of it doesn't carry the same wavelength, I guess, of like human interaction.
Sure. Yeah. I have to say though, the character of Michael Burnham is so like fully realized and fleshed out, and I think is it Sonequa Martin Green? Yeah. I think she is such a fantastic actress. She is unrecognizable between like Terran Michael Burnham to Prime Michael Burnham, and
she does a great job of chewing the mirror universe.
Oh my gosh, like, she's so amazing. Good. And she like, and even how her personality shifted after having to survive alone for a year in the future, thinking she would never see any of them again, and just like how that changed her in small ways and also in kind of big way. Like, it wasn't like, I just think she's so good, and she has such great nuance, and like Ryan chuckles every time she cries, but I love seeing her emote and have feelings. And I just think like it has to be so cool for little girls of color to see this woman take command and do amazing things and be this character who is not a stereotype in any way. She is bold, and she is assertive, and she makes mistakes. She is reckless. No, but she does, like, and she owns up to those mistakes, and she takes on her consequences. I have only great things to say about her.
I for the actress, yes, 100. The actor, 100%. I think it's like that. We're trying to get away from actress nowadays, are we not? I think
so. I'm not quite sure.
But regardless, like for the actor is perfect. And when I laugh at the inevitable tears that occur every episode, that is not meant as a shot towards Sonequa Martin Green. It's not. It's like that. Think about how much screen time she has. Think about how much weight she has to carry for the entire show.
Yeah.
It's everything. She has to do it for everything. And what the writers ask of her is inhuman. And so like that she pulls it off believably. I'm not saying it's not believable. It is. Every moment that she cries, I believe that she's crying, but it's a moment that the writers put her in again. It's like every week she is required to cry because the weight of the show is too much for a character to sustain without breaking the limits of human endurance.
Right.
So I think she's a lot like Janeway in that regard, where like Kate Mulgrew is just a much better actress than the writing that Janeway got by and large.
Mhm.
And like, you know, of course it's a blurry line, and sometimes, you know, you forget, and you know, it's like people talk about Hayden Christensen, where, you
Yeah,
know, not a great performance in Attack of the Clones, but a good actor in his own right in, you know, in different circumstances.
Yeah.
So yeah, completely agree that like as an actress, as an actor, Sonequa Martin Green is great. I loved her back on The Walking Dead. Like, I was pissed that they killed her off because I loved her on that show.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Of a 10-year-old show.
But yeah, it's like you can tell that the actor is bringing 120% to the moment that is written on the page.
Yeah.
Even if 120% has not been brought to the words on the page themselves.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, she does the writers more justice than they do her.
Yeah.
By
by
light years.
Her wild eyes in the mirror universe, she seemed maniacal, and I just like I love when a character is playing like their own evil twin or something, and they're just so unrecognizable as their original character that you buy every minute of it, and I just absolutely did. And
you know, it's a good example of her her inexhaustible talent, where once again the writers and the directors and even the editors have decided, I am going to see how far we can push this actor, and she never breaks. Is in the last moment, is in the moment after the admiral in the season 3 finale says, I want you to be captain, and you know, they have their little exchange, and he says, I need to know now. They hold that camera on Sonequa Martin Green for 10 seconds too long.
Yeah.
And she never cracks. She never breaks. Her eyes never like shift towards the camera.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to yell cut? Like, are you going to? It's just, it's awkward, and it has nothing to do with her. It has everything to do with the artistic choice.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, let's hold this. Hold it. Hold it. Hold it. Hold it. Everybody else can go to lunch. Hold it, Sonequa. Hold it. And she does. And man, God love her.
I also want to say, Pike is great.
I love him.
Love Pike. Yeah. Love that casting. But I had a question for you two about calling what's Rebecca Romijn Stamos's
number
Rebecca
one.
Oh, number one.
No, I know, but her character otherwise.
Number one.
That's all they ever call her?
Yeah, we don't know.
We distinctly don't know that character's name yet.
Well, my problem
because you didn't have a name in the original pilot.
Okay. My problem was with the nickname of number one, which I have only ever heard Riker called number one. Is that a canonical, like every first officer has been called number one, or was that like a direct reference?
I think she is mentioned as number one in the cage.
In the cage, yeah, she is. Like that does happen in the cage. I don't remember if it ends up in the footage that they ended up using for the Menagerie, which is the actual Star Trek episode where they basically took all the footage from the unaired pilot and cut it up and and made a different story out of it. But it is at least in the original pilot itself. And yeah, for whatever reason, like Pike did that for his second officer, but Kirk didn't do it. And then they just kind of reused that, character elements, that tick or whatever you would call it for Picard.
I wonder if the first officer had been any other than the embodiment of Star Trek, Mr. Spock himself. If it had been anybody else, if Spock wasn't first officer, if they would have referred to Scotty as number one, or
or Sulu,
or whatever.
I think it's a good question.
They didn't call.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Spock number one.
But that's my point, because he was Spock. He was Mr. Spock. He
sure.
was what people became like. Oh, the guy with the pointed ears. That show. Like that. He was the face of Star Trek. Much to William Shatner's chagrin.
So every time I heard Pike in Discovery call her number one, I sort of cringed because I thought of Riker, and I thought, like, you can't make that reference. Like, that's not a.
Oh, it's not a reference
You
yet.
can't make that. Yeah, like, so I didn't.
But it actually was a reference, just a deeper cut.
A different thing than I realized. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right? About this show. It's like there are little Easter eggs and fan service, and then
there's
there's
too
also,
much shit. There's just too much.
It's like, then there's things that like you don't understand, or you think you understand, but you're wrong, and like it's just
it's like Game of Thrones, but you actually have 50 years worth of facts to remember.
There's this guy in this stupid door.
Like it's like Game of Thrones, but you actually had to have been watching since Robert's Rebellion to have any idea what the hell is going on.
Right.
So this is already probably going much longer than we had intended.
Sure.
But can we talk about the burn for a minute? Because I thought season 3, the introduction of the event that was known as the burn, was a fantastic story device.
Yeah.
Like a really well, just the fact that all dilithium across the known galaxy had this reaction all at the same time.
Yeah.
It like and it was a great mystery to try to solve throughout the course of season 3. It was a great MacGuffin to drive the storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sincerely fascinated. And it appealed to me as a Star Trek purist, because it seemed like, man, this is cool, that there's like in this fictional element that is dilithium, there is a shelf life, a half-life of dilithium that nobody ever realized.
Interesting.
Like that they were going to put some sort of I expected a greater payoff. I expected a much greater payoff than what they did. And
I think that goes back to like trying to jam character into plot points that are like almost backwards, counterintuitively, like character moments that are too big into plot points that are too small for them, even though the plot point you're talking about is the destruction of all dilithium across the galaxy.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I don't know quite how to but like with Star Wars, for example, the emotion of a son saving his father is intimately like interwoven with the fate of the galaxy, right? And that the relationship of those two elements is a big part of what makes Star Wars Star Wars. But Star Trek is different in the sense that like the individual character journeys or states or whatever are not like so intimately interwoven with the galactic events,
fate of the galaxy.
Yeah.
And it's like Kirk and Spock have an incredibly deep relationship over many, many decades, and that's incredibly impactful, and they save the galaxy a bunch of times, and they save planet Earth a bunch of times, but like it's almost like the power of true love kind of a thing, where like, or the Fifth Element style kind of thing of like, oh, you need the actual literal fifth element of love to save the galaxy,
right?
Like that's a perfectly valid trope in a way to tell a story, but it just feels more like a Star Wars or more of like a fantasy storytelling device than something that feels at home in Star Trek, I guess.
Yeah, which
maybe that's a long-winded way of saying that it's not enough about the technology, I guess.
Yeah.
So did you prior to the resolution or when they discovered the source or what happened with the burn, did the burn intrigue you as a fan of Star Trek?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had the same reaction to me in that, like, oh, this is.
Yeah, I definitely thought that it was a cool idea, and I will say, based on what I thought of the first couple of seasons, I didn't get my hopes up in the sense of like, oh, it's going to be something awesome and I can't wait. More like, oh, that's a good idea. That's a cool idea. Let's see what they do with it.
But I even think that they could have, and they touched on it a little bit. Like in my brain, I already kind of figured out how the burn works from a like a science fiction background as opposed to a science fantasy background, where this kid is basically he's part dilithium, and if he has a temper tantrum, the whole cosmic, but there's a way to tell that story from a scientific background if you mention, and they say that there's a subspace component of dilithium, which okay, fine.
Yeah, they did.
They mentioned that. So in my mind, I have to fill in the gaps. It's like, all right, so this kid, this character, like if he has a fit when he's back on Kelpian, Kaminar, will he cause the destruction of all known dilithium? No, because he's on a planet of dilithium.
But here's the thing, though. It wasn't just that he had a temper tantrum. It was ultimate heartbreak. So it was but like it was, the pain of ultimate suffering or whatever, from Princess Bride.
But,
like it was,
for Star Trek to be at its best, it has to be science fiction, which is it is fiction that is rooted in scientific theory, at least. Even if there's a tendril of scientific theory. So
there was though.
Well, what's subspace? My point is, like, we don't even know what subspace is. Subspace is a word that they use for faster than light communication.
Technobabble.
But if they had said that, like, at the quantum level, dilithium is entangled with itself across the galaxy. So dilithium at some level is quantumly entangled.
I think you have to watch that whole part again though, because they did do a lot of technobabble explanation there at that whole part.
You talking about with Adira and with Culber?
Mm-hmm.
I remember it. They said that they had there's a subspace component to dilithium.
Right, but they talked about how it was part of him, and with his emotions it would cause blah blah blah. And
I think you're filling in more blanks than what they.
I don't think so.
Said.
But if I am, then that means that it got through to me the way they intended.
So this is the way that my brain has justified it retroactively.
Mm-hmm.
Like so, there is this child who's part dilithium. There's a dilithium kid.
Sure.
Okay, and dilithium kid loses
the dilithium kid.
The dilithium kid loses his mom, which is the greatest possible suffering any child could ever think. Like the hopelessness, the fear.
It wasn't just lost his mom. It was watched her die in front of him.
I know. Like I'm getting there.
Okay.
So like that is the greatest sort of. I can't even imagine what dilithium kid was going through, because it's not something that registers on this on a day-to-day scale. So it's huge. Okay.
Yeah.
And dilithium kid is on dilithium planet.
Right.
Okay, so they have the same atomic resonance.
Right.
Okay, so dilithium operates at a certain atomic resonance.
Yeah.
And like even down to the quantum level, where there's quantum entanglement that's happening. And so this dilithium kid has the worst day imaginable and has an emotional reaction to that day that causes all of dilithium planet to send out this shockwave of resonance across the quantumly entangled network of dilithium. That would have made sense. But that would have justified it.
But that's what happened.
I had to come up with that. They just said subspace resonance.
No, they said more than that.
I don't know. What, Brian?
I'd have to watch it again. Like I did have the same impression, or I was able to connect those dots, but I'd have to go back and watch again to see exactly what dots are there versus what are in my head. It's definitely a great example, and again, it's a trope that Star Trek is definitely guilty of in plenty of other spots, but where they have some problem that they've never seen before, and somebody really essentially just pulls one idea out of their ass, and that happens to be exactly the right answer. And it's because it's like, and even in the season 3 finale, they're doing less ass pulling than plenty of the other examples that you could pull from the franchise, but it's still like, yeah, you're having this conversation as the planet is collapsing around you in the span of 5 minutes, when the reality is you have just solved a mystery that has persisted for like 150 years.
That's the other thing with the burn. It's like I know that in all the other series nobody figures anything out until the Enterprise shows up. It just, but this has been like, usually it's like this has gone on for a day or a week or a month or a year, or if it's a species that is that doesn't get a whole lot of Federation interaction, maybe a generation, and then it takes the Enterprise to solve it. But it's like, this was everybody in the Federation, what was left of the Federation, not just where we know the Federation to exist in season 3 of Discovery, but in all the other remnants across the galaxy. Everybody had to be working on this for 150 years. And it was like, they found it out in an hour and a half.
But not necessarily, because as we found out, there were a lot of exterior things going on, and people, trying to take advantage of other people who could no longer travel.
It's just a large pill to swallow.
I know, but...
And maybe we shouldn't be throwing stones at this exact moment, since we definitely fall on that trope in the mission that we just recorded.
Definitely done that kind of thing.
Anyway, I
won't be released for a long time after this is released.
Time.
But we'll get to that trope eventually.
Last thing that I would like to ask of you, Brian: new uniforms at the end of season 3.
The 30th century ones, right?
Yeah.
Like, I like them.
Yeah.
I was never like, I don't hate the Discovery uniforms.
Oh, I do.
But I was never a huge fan of them.
Always dated them.
But yeah, again, I think the original Discovery uniforms go back into what we were talking about at the beginning with like the production value. Like, that on its own looks cool and fine, but it just doesn't fit into kind of the established design ethos of every other iteration of Star Trek on screen that we've ever had. But the 30th century uniforms feel more like that to me.
Yeah,
I'm glad that the main characters are like getting fully integrated into them now. So yes, I'm happy that they're switching over for sure.
Yeah, to regarding I said I hated them. I didn't hate them, but you just said exactly how I feel about them. They didn't feel like Star Trek, because I mean, if you're going to place a Star Trek show before Kirk but after Enterprise, there should be some logical progression between the two, some evolution of it. And I don't know what that would do to go from a jumpsuit to a long sleeve t-shirt, but like, it wasn't Discovery. Like, that wasn't a logical step in the evolution of the uniform. But that being said, I completely agree. I'm totally on board with the new uniforms. And I don't know if I went back to rewatch to cover my bases here. And what I found was, it looks as though navigation, engineering, and ops will be gold. Command only will be red. Science is blue, and medical is white. And I like that a lot.
Yeah, that always made more sense to me, of like separating out science and medical, because medical is such a specific thing.
Yeah.
And science can be 10,000 different things, of exobiology and quantum blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But medical is like, I need somebody to help me not die right now.
Yeah,
I want to know who that person is as quickly as possible.
Get me a blue shirt right now.
Yeah.
I'm an archaeologist. What do you need?
Yeah. I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm a doctor in ancient Vulcan poetry. Oh my god.
Alrighty, well, this has gone on for like an hour and a half now, I think. So
that's what happens.
Yeah.
You mean I only talked about Star Trek for an hour and a half?
Weird.
Yeah, I know.
I'm getting better.
Well, we didn't wrap up really. We're just like, I guess we're done.
Oh yeah, we should probably do an outro.
Yeah, we should.
Okay, everybody, this is the outro. Welcome to the outro.
Outro.
What's the opposite of greetings, everyone?
Yeah,
Let's all go to the lobby. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed listening to this. Join us again next week. We will be talking about Picard, the season 1 of Picard. And then in the not too distant future, we'll actually be starting to release mission episodes again. So that's pretty close on the horizon at this point. So stick around, and we'll see you out there.
See you out there.
We'll see you out there.